And this
It's okay.
isn't being broadcast on KFSK, it was just gonna be zoomed.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
it's just us.
great.
Yeesh, okay.
Well, thank you guys so much for agreeing to a work session and a discussion with us tonight. We appreciate it. We know that there's been a lot of conversation at the state level, obviously a flurry of activity related to education funding, which is good news. We think that it's an important topic that's being discussed. If you are following things, it is a bit of a chaotic mess right now. So what I was hoping to do tonight, I guess, is to give you guys kind of an overview of where we are right now and what we know and what we're requesting and why. And just to let you know that we're here to work with you as the spring goes along, and we know that you're facing a lot of challenges yourself at the borough level, so we understand that. So we just want to say that up front, and thank you guys for taking the time. Do you want to go ahead to the next one?
Sure.
Debbie, thanks. So if you are following this, I've actually updated this slide 3 times in the last couple of days because it keeps changing. So if you are following what's happening in education funding at the legislative level and with the governor, this is a quick recap of what's going on. So on February 22nd, they had an amendment. They worked hard to get it passed that included a $680 increase to the base student allocation, $7.3 million to pupil transportation, a $500 support to the Alaska Reads Act for each student who is determined to have a reading deficiency and needs a plan, a change to correspondence school funding to the full ADM going from 0.9 to 1.0, creating a charter school termination appeal process through the Department of Ed, and creating a charter school coordinator position at DEED. Several of these were in response to some of the things that the governor wanted to see in his version of the bill. So this was their attempt at a compromise. So that passed. On February 26th, the Senate concurred with the House changes to Senate Bill 140 by a margin of 18. The bill had moved to the desk of the governor, and he had the option of signing it into law, vetoing it, or allowing it to become a law in 15 days without a signature. He held a press conference a couple days ago and stated that he will not sign it without the teacher bonuses that he had originally proposed and without a caveat that the charter schools in the state should be able to bypass local school boards and have approval by the state board directly. He will also likely reduce the BSA to $300, which is what he has said from the beginning. So just if you want to know a little bit about that, the teacher bonus piece at first blush sounds great. Sure, let's put some money in people's pockets, and that's what he wants to do. He's proposed $5,000 for teachers, classroom teachers in urban areas, $10,000 for teachers who would be in like our area, Petersburg, and $15,000 for teachers who are working in remote districts. That would be each year they would receive that amount of money directly from the state. So it would not go through the budget process that happens at the local level. It does not go, it's not included in it as a one-time fund to the district. It's not included in the BSA. It goes directly to teachers. That is classroom teachers. That is not special ed teachers. That is not counselors. That is not reading specialists. That is not paraprofessionals. That is not any of the other staff that makes a school run. So that's a concern. So at first blush, it sounds great. There's a lot of concern being raised by teachers themselves about this. There's concern that it's not equitable and it's not necessarily addressing the issue. Rob?
We talked about this yesterday. One of the first things that came to my mind is if you're coming into the state to teach in a rural area, you collect those for 2-3 years and then you bail.
Right. Yep.
That's what we discussed yesterday, right?
Exactly. And that falls in line with some of the concerns that we've been also advocating for several years, and not just for teachers, but for public employees in general, is this retirement issue. So that plays exactly into that issue that you just described, Rob, because there's no real incentive to keep the money here. You can just take it and invest it or do whatever you're going to do and leave. You don't have to, there's no incentive to that. Several school districts that were at the fly-in that we attended a couple weeks ago also brought this to the attention of the legislators that were in a panel with us to say that during COVID in particular, they had funding to be able to use money to try to do exactly what the governor has proposed. And they were able to give those same kind of incentives to teachers in an attempt to recruit and retain. And that is not what they saw. They saw exactly what Rob said. They came for a year or two. They didn't see it do what it was intended to do. So I think it's a nice thought, but it's not going to be infused into a budget. So there's a concern, and it's inequitable amongst teachers that are within the buildings themselves. So other bills to just watch that we are watching, if you are following these, Senate Bill 88, that is a retirement system bill, a return to a defined benefit option. Senator Giesel, there's several people that are trying to move that forward. It's been out for a couple of years. And then Senator Stedman also has one that's looking at TERS contribution rates and a PERS Social Security rate. That's just been proposed, I would say, in the last 2 months. And I don't think it's been completely fleshed out, so.
Erica, what did Senate Bill 88 do in terms of increasing your costs?
That one is more in line with what we typically already do as far as contributions, employee and employer. That's one of the concerns we have about the SB 200 is that that is different. SB 200 is different. It has a higher employer and employee cost.
Do you have any idea what that cost might be?
6%. Sorry.
6.13%. I think it's very comparable to Social Security, 6.2.
Thank you.
Which is what his model was kind of based on. He's looking at that Social Security piece, so. Okay, any other thoughts about legislation?
Well, I think the concern you had with the charter school being controlled by the state with their curriculum rather than a local school board.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to explain this to parents and they get it. If the teachers write a curriculum for 8th grade social studies, which I did many times, it's approved by the school board because they're elected by the local people. And so it's representative of what the local folks want in their curriculum.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think my comment to you was, and it bothered me as a teacher, the further you get from the kids in the classroom, the less you know about and also the local community.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And it gets weird.
Yep.
I don't know another word for it.
No, I think that's a good word for it. And I think that's a big piece of our community focus and really in our state is that focus on local control. That's a lot of conversation that happens here in this borough chambers. So.
Well, and as a parent of 4 kids that went through the school system, if I have a concern with the curriculum or with a teacher, I go right to them.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. So essentially, just to kind of summarize this piece about where the governor is right now, he is essentially has laid down kind of a gauntlet of, there's this 15-day piece. And if these pieces are not somehow addressed in this bill, he will not sign it. So then the only option at that point is for the legislature to try to run an override vote, which will take 3/4 of the legislators to do that. They don't think they have the votes to do that. So there's that. Okay. Thanks, Debbie. I'm not sure I think we shared this last year when we came down just to do a presentation. If you've been at all at the Capitol or up there when school teachers or administrators or parents or people are there, this is something that has been around for a few years now. It's a way of trying to look at something in a visual sense. They call it the famous pencil chart. And the idea behind it is to be able to look at what is happening with regard to inflation and the issues that are arising because it's not being infused into the BSA. So there has been funding over the years. There have been these one-shot pieces anywhere from it could amount to a couple $100,000, it could amount to $500,000, it could amount to no dollars, but it's not infused in that BSA. So it does not help with any other funding opportunities, including funding opportunities at the borough level. So every time it is actually infused in the BSA, that actually increases, I know you're so excited about this, your ability to fund more. Did you like how I did that? Anyway, it allows you an opportunity to provide additional funding every time that it is actually placed inside that base student allocation. What you can see clearly, it's been anywhere from, since 2017 is the key year to look at. Since then, it has not had a significant, it has had a $30 increase in the BSA since 2017, so 59.30. And the last increase was last year with a $30 increase to address all of the requirements of the READS Act, which is not even close to the amount of funding that's needed to address the requirements of the READS Act. Anything else on that you want to add, Shannon?
It does highlight it really well in the box at the top. It's just adjusting the BSA each year for, inflation, what it would be since the fiscal year 12. So you can see in that top box, it just even clearly states inflation adjusted to fiscal year 12 value. So the BSA of $5,960 that we have in this fiscal year, really, it has a fiscal year 12 value of $4,682. So clearly it's not keeping up with inflation.
So kind of that comment on purchasing power, what you can actually get for your dollars. So, and I know you guys are dealing with all this in your own businesses and at the borough level too, so it's not new. We know that. Okay, thanks. The next one is just showing this same sort of thing of what a line showing what the BSA would have been if it had actually been inflation adjusted since 2017. So 2017 through FY 25, $7,373. That's where it should be if it had been adjusted along the way. So that just shows you the same issue that we're dealing with. Anything else on that one?
No, the next one.
Okay. And this one, I'm gonna let Shannon, she loves this slide.
Well, I don't love it, but gets me passionate. This is the same timeline. So these are increases from fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 25 in State of Alaska Department budgets. So the Department of Corrections has received a 42.6% increase since fiscal year 17. Public Safety, 69.4%. You can see them there. DEED Operations, the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, the department that manages the districts in our funding, has received a 19.5%, and school district funding has had a negative 3.4% in that same time. So, the slide before shows where our BSA would have been, that, 7,300 and change. If we had gotten that 19.5% increase since fiscal year 17 in the BSA, it still wouldn't be at the 73, but it would be $7,086 and change. So that would have gone a long way for school districts. And you can just see where the priorities are at the state.
So we kind of talked about this with Rob the other day too, but I think it's pretty, the whole kind of prison pipeline research that's out there, that's it. You invest early or you invest later. So that's where you can put it.
I think you mentioned that Texas has been
Mhm.
figured this out a long time ago.
They have a direct correlation with reading proficiency levels at 3rd grade and the number of beds that they can project in the Department of Corrections. Yeah. Okay. And this is just another example of something that came from the Alaska School Business Officials, which again, this is just a show of 32% increase in goods and services. What can districts do with that? You get about 2/3 of the supplies today that you could with the same dollars in 2017. And actually overall, there's some conversation about, well, kids aren't there, you don't need the money. Over across the statewide in that amount of time, there's been a 1.6 reduction in ADM. So actually our student numbers statewide are actually holding fairly consistent. And that's the case in our district as well. It's definitely leveled off since the beginning of COVID. Okay, next one. And you can see the enrollment trends there. We, just for Petersburg, yeah. And we did have a great boost this year, an unanticipated higher number of students, which was great. It's helped secure our fund balance moving forward. You can also see that our projection, actually our current numbers right now are 454. So we received funding for 469. We're at 454. We are budgeting at this point. We will budget at this point for 450 is what we're planning. That's not as conservative even as I usually like to do, but we'll see how the trends look. We also are keeping an eye on which kids and families we know are going to be here next year. We're able to do a lot of checking on that to try to get solid numbers. So, and that amounts to just even 469 to 454 is $230,000-ish. It's a big number, so. Okay, thanks, Debbie. So the $1 million question, literally, is how did we get by all these years with 1.8, 1.8, 1.8, and then 2.0, and then 3 last year, and now we're requesting funding to the cap? We have a lot of information about why that is, and we will talk through those things. I think it's important to note some of the things that have changed over time, and we'll go through these. Some of the things that have happened even since 2017, and I remember Steve and I having a conversation at the time. We talked about facility maintenance and funding and how that looks, and essentially everybody was kind of hitting that same wall at the same time. And I said, so essentially, we're managing these projects at this point? Yes. And then we were working with the borough on the reimbursements that were possible. And we've been successful with several of those projects on the state CIP list. So that's good news. And that's helped go back into the borough fund to help with future projects. To note, the CIP roof project right now, some of you have been following this, or if you haven't, I'll just let you know, it's number 12 on the state list. It's probable it might get funded. We don't know. I mean, Bert Stedman is certainly going to keep fighting for it. He knows where it is on the list. He will keep working on it. There's a couple Anchorage projects below us, which is helpful. Just politically, seems to things get funded down to a certain level. So that's good news. That's helpful in the sense that that reimbursement, if it comes through, the project itself is a $4.5 million project. The borough would help with the initial outlay of 1.5 million with the anticipation that 3 million of that would be returned at the completion of the project. That's great news. We will know that by the beginning of July. So that will be helpful in the potential bond process here locally. Also on that list, we presented a resolution, I believe, or Debbie will maybe on Monday, that the school board passed about the roof project and the,
I don't actually have it on the agenda.
Okay.
Sorry.
it's okay. I just didn't want to speak about something if it wasn't, yeah. Anyway, so the school board did pass a resolution at their last meeting. That was part of the process when we talked with Steve and Jody about what needed to happen as far as moving forward with, we're requesting that bonding potentially to go forward at the local level, to look at the funding for the CIP project, for the roof project, and also for safety and security upgrades district-wide related to doors and key fobs and a remodel of the entrance in the high school related to visibility for people coming in and out of the buildings. So buildings of 30 years ago were not designed for the issues that we are dealing with now as far as safety and security. And we have had a couple of incidents even in just this school year that have warranted further investigation of what we need to do to make sure things are more secure in our schools. So that project is approximately a $1.4 million project. And I don't need to go all the way down this whole thing because that's more a thing for the borough to talk about at some point in the assembly, but just putting it out there now that we're looking to support that, I guess, locally.
Erica, last year, of all the projects that were submitted in the state, there was only 2 of them, I believe, funded. I'm talking about for schools statewide. Do you see any change of that? I don't, from being up there. Do you? More will be funded.
Two that were included in the governor's budget in December. That's it for this. That's what he put out in December. The last couple of years, it varies. I mean, sometimes they do a sweep, sometimes they'll do 20, sometimes they'll do down to a certain amount, which is good. I feel like, didn't you tell me, were they,
The State Board of Education supported $500 million in CIP projects. So they just put that resolution forward to the legislature.
which would get down through our project, I guess is what we're saying. We don't know that they'll go there, but that's the resolution that they presented, so, yeah. One other thing I do want to make a note of up there, because it's written and it may be another shocking thing to look at, but the maximum local contribution up at the top, if we're talking about funding to the cap, we've been talking about 3.4 forever because 3.4 is what it would be based on the current BSA. If the BSA does have that $680 increase, the borough could actually fund up to $3.6 million. Don't have a heart attack. I'm just saying it out loud because we need to say it out loud because it hasn't changed for a long time. Okay, so I'm just saying that out loud. All right. This is a slide just kind of going through some of the things that would be not that shocking to most of you if you're dealing with businesses in any capacity. Supplies and services obviously are up. Usage is down for utilities. That's good news, but the rates are up even with a mild winter. We've had a significant increase in property and liability insurance. We also had a $45,000 bill this year for cyber insurance. That's potentially going to be something that's going to continue to increase as those challenges continue to face us at the school level. Auditing costs this year, we paid $85,000 in auditing costs. That's a teacher, so that's a requirement. That's what it is. We're hoping that will be less in fiscal year 25. I know, sorry, you know. Another big component, talking about how do we get from 1.8 to 2 to 3 to 3.4 and beyond. We have a long list of grants that are ending this year. We would have been here 4 years ago, for sure, talking to you. We've been able to leverage a lot of grant funding in the last 4 years. So we'll show you some of those numbers in a minute. We also have our salary increases across, you can see, for our classified staff. We are in negotiations currently with our teachers. We do anticipate that we will be having an increase in that salary, in their salaries. And we have held that the last 2 or 3 negotiations with them to 0.5%, 1%, 1.5% increases. That's what we've done. There will be an increase. We're trying to keep that in line because we know that's also challenging in this time to look at that. Even with all of these things, we will be continue to make reductions in our staffing, in our programs, in our facilities, supplies, materials. We'll try to take the easy things first before we start getting into programs and people. And then health insurance increase, like everybody's dealing with, 5.5% increase this year. Okay. This is just kind of showing where we've been and where we're going as far as utilities and heating fuel. You can see if you're looking at those costs even between FY21 and FY23, you can see the jump and the money that's going into that. And the numbers there in FY24 are just through January. So that's not the entire year. So we anticipate that being up comparable with FY23 for costs. And this was something that Jody actually had shared. We wanted to clarify for our board and for the assembly. This is a long-standing conversation that we've been having about shared costs for the community gym and pool. It's a long history of conversation related to MOAs between the school and the borough and what those look like. So currently, what we pay is, and this is for calendar year 2023, these are actual numbers. We paid $181,000 for the boiler in the pool. And we pay about 16,000 for the community gym and craft room. So that's year round. And then the borough pays 103, almost 104,000 related to the aquatic center as well for electricity, water, sewer, refuse, lights. We have some thoughts, we do have some thoughts about that's an area that we would like to propose some reductions in our own programming and potentially are requesting a conversation with the borough about those costs and ways that we might be able to partner differently and also have, I think, some public conversation about how much the facility does cost our community. And knowing that it's not something that's going to be a moneymaker. I don't think anybody in this room ever thought the pool would be a moneymaker. It's a service. It's something that's provided to our community members and people who visit our community. It's definitely a valued part of our program. Do you have a question, Rob?
No,
Okay.
but I was here in this chamber when we talked about the community gym. And it was a contentious issue. But overall, people supported it. It provided, I will just say, the elderly a place to walk during the winter time. And, you know, we ended up voting it through. I'm not sure the history of it and how you ended up paying for part of the utilities and all that stuff. But I do remember the white gym because I worked out in there and had PE classes. And then when we switched from that to the new gym, the community gym, right?
Mhm.
We ended up adding that.
Yep.
And yeah, anyway, I don't know what it's worth, but
Yeah.
we talked about it right here.
Mhm.
There's a lot of public testimony.
Yep, the community service. And just for clarification, it's a good point about how the pool was, how the new facility was built. And there's definitely people even here who were involved in that initially. That was early on in my time here. The new aquatic center was able to be funded as an educational facility as a department, through the Department of Education CIP process. So what I was just describing with the roof project, that's how the community was able to come together and figure out a way to get that kind of reimbursement because they weren't able to get that reimbursement as well, at the time as a city. So they weren't able to apply for that. And Steve, you can correct me if I'm misspeaking on that, but that part of it, that's how the project came to be an educational facility project. Is that?
And I think just through the mayor, you know, and I think Deed wanted to see both parties, you know, kind of contributing to it. So when we talked about the MOA earlier, I think that's why you see the utilities broken out the way they were. I'm not saying we should continue doing that with the situation with the schools in, but I think when Deed agreed to fund it, came along with a lot of caveats. And I think some of it was making sure the school and the borough or city at the time were going to work together to kind of do it. And, you know, as you said, it's hard to support this when you can't hire classroom teachers. So, anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's outdated at this point. We're trying to have these conversations, and I will say we've been trying to have these for several years to try to hammer this out. So, and then honestly, we were making quite a bit of headway in 2020, and then the world fell apart. So we're still here. And of course, there's been a lot of things that have happened in between that time. There was an electrical fire and things got shut down. And I mean, you know, you guys know, this is your world. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's an expense. It's an expensive facility.
Well, when the
So-
first pool was built, Tuesdays and Thursdays were free swim.
Yeah.
And we were pretty excited that we could learn to swim without getting thrown off the bridge at Blind Slough.
That sounds like
But
a
it
better
was
plan.
packed. Tuesdays and Thursdays,
Yeah.
place was packed with kids. And then we started breaking state records with our swim club.
Yeah.
So
Donna, did you?
So the bottom line for the cost of this is close to 300,000? Is that what I'm looking
Yes.
at? Because we've got the boiler for 181, then the gym and craft room for their utilities, and then the aquatic center itself for 103. So
Yes.
we're looking at over 300,000. And presently, the school district pays only 181,000 for
We pay
its
the 181
utilities?
and the 16.
And the 16, okay.
Yeah, that's the current agreement. And we do have some ideas. We've talked with Steve and Jody and a bit with Stephanie too about some ways that we might be able to combine classes and potentially free up opportunities for the gym and the pool to be open more to the community, and maybe we can do a half year thing or whatever. I don't want to start too many rumors about all this, but I'm just saying we're trying to think about ways that there might be opportunities for the community to have more access to some of these facilities as well, and potentially do some more cost sharing with the borough, and also not completely dismantle a program that's important to people who live on an island and boats. So, okay. Thanks. Oh, that bottom one's cut off. Well, I can tell you what the bottom one says. This was just giving you guys just a picture of our fund balance over the past few years so that you can see the one that's, a couple of them that are actually cut off on the bottom are a couple that we wanted you to look at, but it's all right. So looking at those fund balances, as you know, we've talked about this over the years, that the school district is not able to carry more than 10% of a fund balance forward, which ends up being about 4 weeks of operating expenses. During COVID, you can see those, they took that cap off. They removed it until 2025, so that we had about a 14% fund balance in 2020, 15.5 in 2021, it's on here. About 13.5 in 2022, 9% in 2023, and we're projected to have about 10.6% fund balance, and this will be the last year that we can carry, you're right, of that amount of a fund balance. So we just wanted to show that, and I think just to clarify, we've had some questions about this from people as well. I think it's important to note that that fund balance is 4 weeks of operating expense. That's not 6 months, which is actually what most businesses recommend. It's a month. And so it's not like a ton of money that's sitting around just waiting to be spent like a checking account. It is something that is needed if you have a boiler blowout, you have 3 people that have to go on 6 months of medical leave, and you need subs, and those are the kinds of things. So I think it's just important to note that it's not like just a checking account that's just hanging out. You know, we use it, we deplete it, it's gone. So I think it's just worth noting that. Okay. So I did put the 3.6 up there. Again, don't have a heart attack. We don't know where that's going to go. The 680 is very much not a guarantee at this point. That 680 in the BSA is very much not a guarantee. We just need that to be clear. We're hoping, even if I guess if it ends up being 300, which is less than what we received this year also. If it's in the BSA, that is, again, that's better than being outside of the BSA. That is still important. If you're looking for advocacy things you might want to say to the governor or anybody else, you could add that to your list. It's just important to have it in there. So that would be those are the revenue pieces. The expenditures, if we're looking at what a status quo type of budget might be, that does not mean that it would not come without reductions. So we would be continuing to do the kinds of things we've done over the years, which is strategically reduce. A teacher retires or moves, we look at every single position, and we have reduced positions over the years, and they have not been replaced. And that's okay. When you look at programs, you do an assessment every time, and that's what we do. We are looking at ways to consolidate classes. We are looking at ways to be more creative, maybe with some of our high school courses that do have smaller numbers. And if there's ways that we can combine them utilizing different types of tools and programs, still having like a teacher assigned, but maybe it's 2 or 3 types of courses that might be able to be taking place within the same setting with different programs. Those are some ideas that we need to think about, trying to meet the needs of students with career technical and vocational programs all the way through algebra classes and AP offerings. And we are proud of the fact that we have those offerings in a small community. And when we do have people move here and they come through our school and they ask us those questions and they're making decisions about their children, those are things that they want to see. They want to see options and opportunities for their kids. We know we can't do everything. We get it. And we're willing to be creative, but we also just need that to be set. We need to know what it is that we're looking at and how we want our system to look and what opportunities we want to have for our kids moving forward, knowing that people are making those kinds of decisions. They tour school, they tour the hospital, they ask questions. They call us and they ask us those kinds of things because these reductions are taking place all over the state and the country. So people are shopping. That's what I would say. The reduced pool use, we talked a little bit about that. I referenced that. That is not something we know. It's something we're talking about. We're brainstorming a bit. We will be making reductions to additional mental health and nurse services. We have a couple of grants that help support some of those side contracts that we have with the medical center. We were able to utilize some ARPA funds this year to enhance those, which were very needed. We have had very significant mental health issues with our students. We've had suicidal ideation. We have had to involve more professionals this year than we ever have in my time here. So those needs are not reducing, but the supports potentially are reducing. So we need to consider that. As I said earlier, the easy things, I'm putting that in parentheses, are things like supplies and materials, classroom supplies, professional development opportunities. We will be looking at activities and travel. I can go on for hours about the ferry, but you guys all lobby for that too, so I don't need to really tell you about that. Nightmare. We are definitely looking at our technology, which will be an impact. We have been able to infuse a lot of our ARPA funding and COVID funding into our technology, so that's good. That's good news. Those are the kinds of places we needed to put that. And so we will be dialing back some of those pieces, which will buy us a few years. So I think those are important things to note. Next one. Thanks, Debbie.
Can you, question
sorry, Bob.
for you. If looking at your staffing, what's happened over the last couple of years, your ability to fill staff and what you see coming up?
Yeah.
And if you can.
What we're seeing is that our salaries need to be addressed, especially our incoming low-end salaries. We have lost people in the last couple of years because they can't afford to live here. So they can't afford to take further coursework on the salary. It's the way it is. So that needs to be addressed. The retention issue, the recruitment issue, some of the specialized areas, we have been working all year to secure an upper level math teacher, for example, and we've never had this level of challenge. That is not just a Petersburg thing. That is statewide and nationally. Some of those specific types of areas they can make, to be blunt, they can make a lot more money somewhere else. They can go work for an engineering firm. They can work for a computer technology. They can do a lot of other things with those skills, and they are. So, yes, we're seeing that. We're seeing a significant challenge in recruitment for all of our positions in that sense. So you might have 6 people apply. 10 years ago, have 20 people apply. So even for an elementary position, for example. Yeah.
Can I kick in here?
Yeah.
So I went to school here in the 70s and 80s. And we had oil money and we had timber money and we had fishing money. And the teachers were on tier 1 retirement. And they were happy. And they ran intramural football. And things were happening. There was money around. And I ended up 6 months from tier one and ended up tier two. Oh, well, tier two was quite a bit less than tier one, but it was fair. I thought it was fair to everybody. And I was happy with that. I was a BA plus 36, so you got me cheap, but my master's degree was on the wall in the gym and down in the harbor. Then I went tier three, a little bit less than tier two. Now I'm looking at the city workers' PERS, and I'm looking at the teachers, and I looked at it 15, 20 years ago at tier four. Not even comparable, not comparable at all. So I needed to say that.
Yep. I think it's very important to note, and the retirement issue is a huge issue, as you mentioned. That's another question that we do get when people do come here or they're looking at positions here. They ask those kinds of questions about the retirement system, for sure. So it's definitely an issue. We wanted to just talk, I wanted to address a little bit more about grants. Again, getting back to the, how do we get to the, from the 1.8 to the 2 to the 3 to the 3.4? I'm gonna keep saying it, or 3.6. So we've done it with a lot of strategic reduction and a lot of grants. So the numbers above on the continued, those are kind of our formula grants. Those are the things that we receive every year. And some of them are ones that we have to write every 3 years. One of them is the suicide prevention grant. We've gone through about 3 cycles with that one. I think we're in our 3rd or 4th cycle with the suicide prevention grant. It's about $28,000 a year for us. Not enough, as I just said about mental health support. It doesn't buy us very much outside help. The other ones are things like migrant education and Title I, which is designed to provide supports for students who are struggling. Career technical education, we get some other funding for Indian education, about $35,000 a year for that. Small rural school achievement, SRSA, that's used for professional development. It's anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 a year. And that helps provide, can provide travel, or we can bring in people to provide professional development using that funding. So you can see up there, that's about $850,000 in FY24. Grants that are ending, these are the things that are the killers right now for us. It's about 1.5 million ending this year. Obviously, COVID funds, you guys are dealing with the final dollars coming out of that as well. What we found this year, excuse me, what we found this year is that the state also had COVID funding to spend. We think they put it in great places. They put it into these types of grants. So one of the ones on there, like that CLSD, that's a literacy, statewide literacy grant. It was about $220,000. We wrote that grant and we received it, and it all came in this year. And we've been able to use it for significant professional development. We've been able to use it to fund people. These things are all include people. So portions of people, there are people in all of these. Early learning, we were able to secure about $180,000 in that one this year. That was a one-time. So was the CLSD. That helped us pay for the preschool that we're providing, integrated preschool with our special ed students and same age peers. It's about our 3rd year doing that. So we were able to put funding back into the general fund and utilize 1 year of grant funding. So we just kind of keep putting this thing off, I guess is what I'm saying. We keep pushing this thing further, kicking the can down the road in that regard. The school improvement grant we received last year, we received another $25,000 for that this year to provide support for our elementary school. That's been helpful. We had a health and wellness grant for several years. Ginger was part of that one. She's back here. And then we've had several other professional development travel grants that the state has been pushing out to districts. We just keep kind of getting these trickles of them all spring. And I do think it's been federal COVID dollars they're trying to get through that, and they're giving it back out to districts, which is great. We can use that for those programs. But it's important to note that these are people. Okay. These are sort of the high ticket items. I think it's important just to look at those costs, looking at the swim program, looking at activities overall. And those are people and travel and all the things that go into it. CTE is about 150,000. We've already zeroed out the laptop, which typically is about 48,000. So we've already zeroed that. Maintenance and custodial supplies, you can see those amounts. And I think those are things like we all know. Several people in here have boats and we all have houses and different things. You can make strategic cuts in those areas. You have to be careful. You don't want things to get too far off the rails and then you have to start rebuilding and redoing, and that's not helpful either. Classroom teaching supplies, you can see, is about 48,000, curriculum 36. So those are the things that can go, I don't want to say they're not easily, they're quick, but once they're gone, they're gone. It's $40,000. It's $40,000. We can do those things and we will strategically do that. We've done it over the years. We've had supply freezes and all that kind of thing, and we will do that. We're prepared to do it now. Already. Yeah,
Does the swim program include the utility costs?
it has the teacher, utilities, and and a, is it all a half the teacher?
I think it's about, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah. So it's about that, all of those program costs are about 1.1 million.
Do you have any idea the portion of travel cost included in the activity?
We can get it for you. We can pencil that out. Okay,
That's like up significantly now that the ferry systems.
yeah, yeah.
Back.
Is that the actual cost or is it netted with the fees that each student is charged for being in the activity?
That's just the expense.
Yeah. And that's been a discussion as well. Activity fees, of course, are always up for discussion. We did bump them up a few years ago. They are less than a lot of districts. I think it's always a challenge to just talk about those things, that you become a pay-to-play place, and that can happen. There are certainly going to be kids and families that can't afford to do those things, and we have some scholarship opportunities and things like that too. We do have people that want to help with students, but we're just trying to be mindful of that as well. So, yeah. Okay. So summing it all up, we are going to continue to be making strategic reductions. I think it's important to note there's a lot of conversation that happens. I hear it kind of on the national level and the state level and even locally, talking about numbers need to go right to the classrooms and those kind of things, and we got to get rid of bloated admin budgets and all of that. You can look at the tasks that have been added to people's plates over the last few years, and you can look at the people, and they haven't increased. I mean, I've been here forever now, and I'm one person, and the elementary principal is one person, and the high school secondary principal is one person, and the job itself has certainly not gotten simpler. The tasks have just added to people. So all of the READS Act logistics have fallen to Ms. Khan. She spends a ridiculous amount of time that is on her own time, working through the logistics around that. And whenever there has been an opportunity for something like, well, we probably should, maybe we could add back in another, could we get another counselor? Could we do something else to get an assistant principal? Could you look at these things? Could we talk about this? And it comes down to it, and the priority has always been to put it back into the classroom. So if we can put it toward a teacher or toward an aide to help offset what's happening with special needs students and support students where they are, and with significant behavioral needs in some cases, that's where we put it. So that's why I'm federal programs and I'm HR and people, what we do, but we've reached the point that there's no more there's only so many hats people can wear. And so that's where we are. We're kind of at that breaking point. Staffing wise, there's just not much more that can be added to people at this point. So go ahead, Rob.
So I'm listening to you. I'm not disagreeing with you. 92, 93, 23 kids in a classroom, lots of issues. no aids. You're on your own. Survive it, like first right out of the gate. So all of a sudden I have these paraprofessionals, Jill Williams, shout out. I mean, wow. And Nancy Curtis, and they've got nothing but respect, and it made my job easier, much easier. What has changed since 92, 93 as far as the requirements, mandates, or whatever in the classrooms for paraprofessionals?
That's a good question. I would say if we're looking at intensive special education needs and overall special education needs, things are more complicated. That's what I would say. There's a lot more federal requirements related to especially that particular area, special education. The amount of paperwork continues to grow, the amount of times that you are required to report and do all the things that need to happen, which is appropriate. Those are the laws, and they're meant to protect students' rights and their educational opportunities. The programming is more complex. That's what I would say. And some of the needs that we're seeing with students are more complex. And the higher incidences of behavioral issues, safety concerns, and even just in general, some of the specific diagnoses around, we have a pretty high population, really statewide even, and a pretty significant increase in students who are on the autism spectrum, for example. And they require very specialized instruction, and it's varied instruction. So it's not a one size fits all. And so we want our students to have as many opportunities as they can, regardless of skill level and ability. We want them to be able to have as high of a shot as anybody else at the things that we want to provide for them. So it's more complex.
Some of that's law, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So the fiscal cliff conversation, Shannon just received this today, actually, yesterday, and we thought that it might be an interesting read for you, this whole conversation about who's responsible, everyone, how did we get here, why are we here, kind of a thing. I think this does a nice job summarizing this. This is from the Alaska School Business Officials. They're the numbers people. And so I think it's a nice kind of summary that if you're interested in that, and we can certainly provide it to other people who might be interested. But I think that this cliff conversation, we have held it off as long as we can. I guess that's what I'm saying. I feel that we have been very intentional about budgeting, about where we've put our money, about the amounts of responsibilities that our people have been asked to do. And we are there. We are there. So do you guys have other specific questions for us? Oops, sorry, Donna.
Regarding the READS Act, what is the per student estimated cost to carry that plan into effect?
That's a great question. We have, so that one grant that I was showing you, that CLSD grant, for example, that was a $220,000 grant. We chose to put a bulk of that into a reading interventionist that was not funded by the state $30 allocation. So we do have 2 reading interventionists right now in the elementary school who are designed to try to support the requirements related to, 10, all of the testing that has to happen, that has to be reported not just to families, but at the state level. And if a student is identified as having a significant reading disability or deficiency at that point, then there's certain requirements that have to be done every 3 weeks, things that have to be tested and reported at that point. So I would say, yeah, we can estimate that out, but I would say, at this point, if we added a teacher in, so you could add the cost of a teacher to that, and so you could say $110,000, or with benefits and all of those kinds of things, what does that cost? That would be a cost. We have also added in a couple of paraprofessionals to provide that support. We were able to utilize several of the grants to to purchase intervention kits. And also the curriculum that was required last year was a grant. We wrote a grant to receive that. So it was about $80,000 for a new English language arts curriculum. That did not come from the general fund at that point. We used a grant for that. We want to maintain, we need to maintain the reading interventionists we have. We don't have a grant for one of those. So that's one of the needs that we have moving forward. We need them to be able to implement. So we can get you more specific details if you want at that point. Yeah. Thomas.
So if the borough were to approve funding up to the cap, would that enable the school district to provide more competitive salaries for its teachers? Is that realistic, or are we talking about just covering increased fixed costs at this point?
We are committed to increasing salaries this year. And so that is one of the pieces that's one of the reasons that we are requesting additional funding. So yes, and we are actively in negotiations. And one of the priorities that we do have is looking at our new and incoming teacher salaries. Right now, they are at a $47,000 level. That's where they are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the total number of teachers and the paraprofessionals?
We have 42 teachers and
Did it
8,
just yesterday in any.
how many parapros?
I'd say approximately.
Yeah, I was gonna say 20.
So can we talk about activities? $460,000 and much of that is travel. What avenues are you looking at to whittle that down?
So we're looking at reducing opportunities for travel for middle school for sure. Looking at more of an intramural model. I think at that level, we do have enough students, I think, to make something that would be a solid program there for our kids. We have a pretty good number of kids that participate, so I think that's reasonable. I think we would be looking at reducing the numbers of people that do travel. We already have some limits on that, but I think in general, we'd just have to look at that. We do have a contract with Alaska Airlines. They're pretty good about trying to support schools because they know we're all living in the same world. We just got an email from the person at Alaska Airlines today about looking at our contract again. They try to give us some different rates for things for groups and things like that. So we try to purchase things enough ahead of time as we can. We we do utilize miles. We purchase things on a card. We have a district card that we're able to use miles. So that's something we started doing about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. Trying to capitalize on that, things we can pay for on a card, and then having miles like we all use. That's been helpful for like refs, things like that. So that's something that's helpful. If we can utilize breakaway and boats, we've been doing more of that, certainly in Southeast, and getting back and forth to Wrangell. Obviously, that's an easy one, but also, excuse me, Kaufman Cove, that kind of thing. We actually had a run to Ketchikan a week and a half ago, which was interesting. It's a long run.
I don't know what's going on here. Oh, I gotta quit touching it.
Stop touching.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday as well. So you have teachers or percentage that will run a K through 5 club with help from parents and alumni and so forth. We talked about this with Jamie as well, Cabral. The kids were happy, parents were. It took snow shoveling and chopping wood and everything else. But you're gonna need to have teachers that are going to step up to do that kind of thing. And, you know, we're looking at salaries and morale,
Mhm.
but also guts and just what is, it was the best job I ever had because I was invested in the community and a lot of the things that we did as volunteers, what's the best for the kids in Petersburg? That was the bottom line. I never made a lot of money on it, but I had other options with fishing. So I don't quite know how to communicate this, but if you're dedicated to the students of Petersburg and you want the best possible scenario for your kids, your friends' kids, your community's kids, it is doing more with less.
Mhm.
Because I had buddies the same age that were building financial empires while you're coaching kindergarten through 5th grade.
Right.
That's how that went. So when you're doing your hiring, look for that energy. Thank you.
Mhm. Yep. And we do have some incredible educators in our district who, past and current, obviously, um, step up to do things like clubs and things after school, and what can they do to get kids engaged that might not be in another activity, just like you're saying. And doing that sometimes on their own time, or kids bring a $5 whatever to, be in the baking club, that kind of thing. Kids that aren't involved in something else. So yeah, I appreciate that.
I think once a quarter we did in the winter. Oh, on a Friday at the end of the quarter, snow, let's do a sledding party in the afternoon on a Friday up at the water tower hill. It
Yeah.
was huge for morale for the students,
Yeah,
and it was kind of fun for me too.
I can totally pick it up.
Yeah, but the good we have had this work session. I'm sure we'll have more discussions before now in June when we get our budget finalized and see what shakes out in the Capitol. But it's, it doesn't look like the governor's gonna, be acceptable to the $680 BSA raise at all.
Yeah.
From what I've been hearing. And, we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
And we have to figure out, how can we, the borough, the community, absorb another $700,000 this year to the school. I mean, even if we're not funding up to the cap, so yeah, it's gonna be some tough discussions, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this is a start.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys listening and asking questions, and we're available if people want to talk further or.
And we're supposed to have a discussion, the same way as with the school board, once a year anyway by charter, so maybe it should be more frequently than that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think I said same storm, different boats.
Yep.
We don't know when we're gonna get paid for our Tanner crab and brown crab. We're not sure.
Yeah.
I think Petersburgians love figurative language because I've heard, squeezing blood out of a rock. There's no more juice in the lemon. People are strapped, and I think everybody that has a family and has got to pay mortgages and got to pay for food and the utilities and everything else. And a gal called me 2 days ago in tears because she's on a fixed income.
Yeah.
And she doesn't know how she's gonna make it. So if we're looking at mill increases or sales tax, whatever it is, it's a group effort. We said this yesterday, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
hard sell.
Yeah.
It just is. I mean, I hear from a lot of people, and there's borough assembly, and then above borough assembly, it's the citizens of Petersburg. And so it's, you can understand the position we're in.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
The school board certainly does.
Like Rob just said, there's, it's kind of I wouldn't call it a dark time, but it's kind of a tough time right now for the people in the fishing industry. There's, young fishermen that, are trying to raise a family, pay for boats and permits, and, nothing's getting cheaper as far as groceries or utilities. We all know that, just like it's been said numerous times. So, yeah, hopefully we can hold our nice little community together. And, it's, great place to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
so. But how do we do it with what the fiscal part?
Yeah.
I don't see anything for 5 meetings and then I start blah, blah, blah. We knew 12, 15, 20 years ago that we were the lowest paid district as teachers of anywhere in the region. We knew this. I mean, a buddy of mine in 2017 was doing negotiations for Craig. And he threw Wrangel's out because they were the highest paid teachers, and he threw Petersburg's out because they were the lowest paid. And I had some comments about that at the time that went over like a dump truck load of horse poop at the school. But I think the first thing I said to you is we've got to figure out a way to get people paid.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking for this. So, you know, it's now official.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we didn't, know, but it's nice to have the discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Erica, you gave me the governor's phone number
I did.
and the email address.
I did.
And I don't know how we can get that out to folks, but parents
Happy to share it.
need to be putting pressure there.
Yeah.
And try to be meticulous with your words so that the governor just says that Petersburg is a problem. We're not ever funding them anything.
I can share that with anybody who wants it.
I
For sure.
don't think you'll get a response.
I think you
That's
might be
just the
right,
way
but
this particular elected official operates.
all right.
And he won't come to Mayfest because he's afraid he's gonna get tied to the bow of the Viking ship and get rotten fruit thrown at him. It was right out of his mouth last week when I invited him, so. And maybe that's the way he feels about going and visit any community if it's not in the rail belt.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Hope he's not listening.
You may have
might
just
be
laid
right.
out the gauntlet, Mark.
Mark Jensen,
Yeah.